because we're like the snow. We do what we want.
Exactly. I know it's interesting because the snow seems to come unexpectedly, at least in my world, when there's like a new beginning happening. And I've been giving myself a couple of little like tarot readings the last couple days, and like major themes of, completing cycles and new beginnings and fresh starts and like onto like higher and newer things. And here's the snow. I'm like, oh, wow, this is interesting. So yeah, I don't know. It definitely communicates the weather with us.
Yeah. Well, and that's also Aries energy right now. And your Pisces there with like the end, the completion of the cycles. We have so much of that. And then there's also like simultaneously so much of the new coming to us. So yeah, there's a lot still going on. The net effect is kind of like, am I coming? Am I going? Who am I? Do I know what's happening? No.
No.
Just kind of go with it a little bit.
Exactly. Especially like, I think it's, I haven't paid attention to astrology. This is my first year, like really paying attention week by week to like everything that's going on and tuning into that. But it is interesting. Still kind of on the snow thing, that at least where I'm at, we tend to get our last snow is like maybe in March. So it almost seems like it is like tied in with Pisces season transitioning into Aries season and like kind of the completion of the year and new beginnings coming up. And now that Pisces energy is so drawn out into this month of April, where normally we're already at spring, it's Aries season, but there's so much more Pisces lingering. And I'm still a little bit sick, which is another reminder to slow down and just be in the moment. Just relax.
Yeah.
So all
surrender.
Of that, like surrender.
That Pisces, like, yes, the drawn out winter. So yeah, the snow, like on into the spring, that sounds about right. And then also the sickness associated with winter and the call to presence, the call to slow down and take good care of ourselves and all of that. Because I'm a big believer that sickness is, like you went past the rumble strips and now you're in the ditch. And that's like the physical manifestation is like so far down the path. So yeah, I'm dying to hear like how your last couple of weeks has been, like often.
For sure. Definitely like my rumble strips have been telling me, which is kind of a funny insight I got lately that I know that I've shared this with you, I think last time, but I've just been feeling like I need to treat myself more like an old lady or like an old person, and how we give respect to old people, but we also acknowledge like that their bodies aren't in the same condition that they used to be, and like things get a little harder in life, and we offer a little extra help, maybe a little extra understanding or compassion, and also a lot of extra care. Like I think of my great grandma who lived to be 103 and who was literally presented with a milkshake for lunch every day because like that's what she liked to eat. And like that's just so lovely. Like if you want to have a milkshake, then go for it. But like the kind of care that we give old people, like we don't really give that kind of care to ourselves. And I've just been thinking like, I care for my inner child, but what about like treating myself more like an old lady and giving myself a little more respect with that care? And I think maybe I moved a little too far past that rumble strip. And then now my body is like, please care for me. Please let me rest in the middle of the day like an old person would do. Like just fall asleep in front of the TV. It's okay.
Like give into that.
Yes.
Give into honoring that this is what my body's asking for. Like what sounds best to me right now is a milkshake for lunch. Like, and it's you're so right. Like we do so much more often identify with our inner child, but like, what about our inner old person? Like in terms of time is kind of irrelevant, and everything we've ever been, everything we'll ever be is kind of all existing in the now. Like we identify maybe more with our inner child because we have memories of being a child and we don't really know yet, like, right. Unless you're that age, like you don't know what it's like to be an old person. So you don't really factor it in, but you're that now too. So yeah, I love that. It feels more respectful than like treating yourself like a child.
Right.
It like encompasses the wisdom of life, but still the ease of, like, I love that you said like she was presented with, not just she had, like somebody went and got it and brought it to her. Like that's the level of it.
Exactly.
That's, oh, you deserve that. We all deserve that.
We all deserve that, not only when we're old. And if you like identify more as like an old soul, you know, like I think that the age of your soul, I mean, our souls are probably all a lot older than we would think, you know, it's very unlikely that anyone is living. I mean, I'm sure that there are people, but it's unlikely that you'd be living your very first life right now. Oh. And hello, he's a little bit freaked out. The snow keeps falling off, like kind of the roof part, and he's a little freaked out by that. But technically, we've all lived lives. We've all been old before. And it is a feeling that you may not consciously remember, but you can get in touch with. And something that like I've been saying, I guess, you know, like I've been saying this out loud and therefore probably manifesting it. I acknowledge this, but since I was like 16 years old, I've been saying that I feel like I'm like 85. Like what is this? Like, why does my body hurt? Why do I feel old? Why do I have all these like feelings of something that like a 16-year-old should not be feeling? And it's like, you might be 16 or whatever, however old you are right now in this life, but it's not like you've never been older than that before. So that's like an interesting way to kind of give yourself some validation. Like for me, you know, feeling that way since I was so young, I'm like, okay, well, maybe I've lived a lot of lives. I've been here a lot. And it feels like I've done this shit. My body feels a little worn down. And maybe I'm in one of my later stage lives where, like, I'm not going to say I'm never going to come back here again because Earth is a pretty cool place, but, you know, maybe we've all done this. We've been around the block a few times. So we're a little tired, and that's okay.
That makes so much sense. Like, okay. I mean, I resonate with that as far as like just low physical energy in general. And early on, like in high school, when it first started, I had mono when I was like 14, 15 years old. And they say like, once you have mono, like you're never the same. And so I couldn't ever really tell, like, did I pick up that conditioning and it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy, or was it actually true? Because there was definitely a difference afterwards. Like my physical energy never really came back. And it really is like, I'm basically on bed rest, like an old person most of the time, like a really old one that like all they got left is just to sit and be. Like that's a lot of what I get up to in my daily life. And I'm, almost.
And you would not give an old person a hard time about it. You'd say, don't overdo it. Just rest. Don't overdo it. Don't hurt yourself. Although I do admit, like in my traveling, like I did back when I was in college, I did a study abroad in Italy, and the older people there are so self-sufficient and they're so capable. And like, if you offer them a seat on the bus, they're not going to take it. They're going to just look at you like, you sit down. Like, I don't need a seat. You sit down on the seat. Like, and so there's kind of a difference in culture there, but that's also maybe something important to remember, that being old is also not equated with being incapable of doing things for yourself. It's more that like you acknowledge the wisdom that you have in the life that you've lived and kind of where you're at. And you just allow yourself to be as self-sufficient as you naturally are at that phase, which sometimes culture is determining of that to an extent, like in other places. So,
well, and that's like, it made me kind of think like us as old people, you know, us 50 years from now is probably not going to be the same as old people right now today, because they were born and raised like in the 50s and 60s. And that's like their culture that they're aging, you know, through time. And like we were born when we were born, and then we're going to age that culture. Like, it's just, what does it even mean to be old? Because then you got things online like 100-year-old yoga teachers and shit like that. That's like, age is really not as much of a thing as we think it is. Like there's so much more at play. And I like how you brought the past lives into it. And like, maybe you've done a lot of work in those past lives, and this lifetime that you're in is legit just so you can rest. like just so your soul can rest, and you've done the challenging lessons, and now you're here to learn the lessons of like simplicity and simply letting well-being be a thing, like letting yourself rest when you're tired. Like, how easy is that? Except there's so many reasons why we tell ourselves like, no, no, no.
Yeah,
no.
That's limitations being like, I'm too young for that. Like, I'm not in that stage of my life. It's like, well, age really is like, it's something we use to limit ourselves mostly. I mean, it's partially like we can keep track of, I don't know, maybe it's like organizational, but it's also kind of a limitation that we put on ourselves. And kind of partially have gotten to this place of thinking about things this way is I discovered, his name is Ainsley MacLeod. But I discovered his work, and it's a lot of his work is around like soul age, basically, which I don't like fully identify with, you know, like seeing souls as having like a linear, like level 1, 2, 3 kind of age. But I do get the like gist of what he's saying of like, you know, like if you identify as one of those higher levels of like soul age, basically, having been here a lot, done a lot of work, you're in kind of one of the higher phases of evolution as a human. We would, if we were like beyond all the human evolution, we would not be here. So, you know, it's easy to be like, oh, well, I'm above that. Like, I get all this stuff. I did the work. I've done the work. It's like, you wouldn't be here if there weren't work to do. So, you know, a little bit of like humbling there, but, and I will put his name in the description, but for his work.
Yeah, did you like buy a book of his, or is there like a podcast, or what
he has a free online quiz to like determine your soul types or something like that. And then mostly I've just seen his Instagram, like I've seen his social media, and he posts cool stuff about like certain of his ideas of different soul levels, and he'll put like some like describing factors of like soul level 3, like, do you identify with these points? And I know he has a book, so I feel like at some point I'm going to buy and read his book, but I haven't like reached that point yet. But yeah, it just really helped me to see that like, if you're at one of those higher levels of soul evolution, you might be living, it's almost like take your normal lifespan, baby to old person, birth to death, but spread that, like kind of take a step back and spread that over all the lives you've lived here on earth. And if you're in one of those later phases, you're kind of in your old person life, you know, where like your whole life kind of gets to be, give yourself a little more credit, give yourself a little more rest. You've been here a lot. You're probably a little bit exhausted, even if you don't really fully understand why, because now we're looking at this on a bigger scale instead of just your one conscious life. So it's like, it takes a lot of, I don't know, just understanding and being able to, again, surrender to like, let go of, I don't need to have all the details as to why I'm so tired and exhausted, but I can trust that like, I've been doing work here on earth for a while now, and I'm like a little tired, and that's okay. That's okay. I'm still here, so I still have work to do, but at my own pace. And that's fine.
I think that's what, as we get older, and this is, I mean, even in your 20s to your 30s to your, like, you get better and better and better and better at going with your own pace. And that's like, older people are really good at that. At like, they walk at their own pace. They do what, like, you know, organize their lives so that it makes sense for them. And that's all we ever have to do. And so, yeah, like learning to do that early on, or just naturally being inclined towards that early on. Like, I really like that. I love a good quiz. So
yeah, totally.
I'll pass that along.
Find the link. Quizzes are always fun. And, you know, always to be like reconciled with your own, whatever you're bringing to the table, your beliefs and stuff. Like, just because someone else has something to say that doesn't mesh well with what you already believe, like, you don't have to drop everything you believe and just be like, well, this person's right. They said this, so they're right. It's like, well, then you're giving your power away. So, you know, you don't have to like, you can take everything with a grain of salt and reconcile it with your own beliefs and just see how it sits for you. But I definitely, I like this person's work personally. And like, I've taken it kind of with like a more broad perspective than he presents it with, but I think that's okay, because that's just what works for me and like my beliefs. So
totally.
Yeah.
Well, and it's possible to even listen to, like, so when I was in high school, I went to this church, and while I personally on the inside identified as atheist, like I don't even believe that there is a God. And yet every Sunday I go to this church on purpose because I really like listening to the way she talks about God and our neighbors and all of these different life principles. And if you strip away the verbiage, the essence of like what they're teaching you, I was able to absorb beautiful lessons that I felt like made me a better person, even though I personally don't identify with the exact way that you understand it. I still got so much out of it. So I think that's like a skill to let yourself be open to getting a nugget here and a nugget here and a nugget here. And you don't ever have to just copy and paste somebody else's what they got going on. Like, that's not the way. It comes back to like resonance. And, you know, if you're in the process of practicing your intuition or like practicing listening to your intuition, and you are practicing listening for resonance, like, ooh, that thing that they just said lit me up. Like that felt true to me.
Yep.
So great, take it with you. And if what they're saying is like, I mean, I see what they mean, but mine's like this and this and this, then that doesn't resonate. No big deal.
That's okay.
You know?
And even if it's sometimes something will resonate and you just don't get it. And it's like, wait, what does this mean though? This doesn't mesh well with what I believe in. And sometimes you just gotta, something resonates, you just gotta let it sit. And if it sticks around and keeps popping back up, then like there's definitely something to it.
Yeah. Like that's how I found Abraham was like, I mean, I was not a spiritual person whatsoever. And she's talking about source energy and non-physical and emotional guidance and on and on and on with like all these concepts that I have no clue like how any of this fits together. But the sound of her voice, like I stuck around and I listened over and over and over again. And I figured out what she was talking about by listening, but I listened because I resonated. Like there was just something in me that just like said, yes, more, please. Like I need more of this. And you don't have to understand it fully to receive like that impulse of curiosity and intrigue, you know?
So I'm already thinking about, obviously I've wanted to talk, I've wanted to talk about this book that I discovered. So I'll just show everyone. This is Busting Loose from the Money Game by Robert Scheinfeld. He refers to himself in the book as Bob, so I'll probably call him Bob. And again, here is something where he presents some really like big, pretty mind-blowing ideas. But again, like for me, it's actually like taken me a couple of days to like let the dust settle and be like, okay, how do I reckon this with what I already know to be true through my own sensing of resonance and like the truth that I've already found for myself? How do I reconcile that with what this book presents? Because I guess like in short, one of the main messages of this book is that like, for one, nothing is real. Nothing is real. Nothing is real. So what are you so worried about? And then the second, I guess, probably biggest point of the book is that like, there is no, like, there's nothing bigger than us because we are each God. And so there's nothing to worship. There's nothing to, besides ourselves, basically. So like when you see your higher self, or he refers to it as like the expanded self, but like however you want to look at it, your higher self, your inner being, your expanded self, it's like there is nothing bigger than that. So when you are surrendering to source, we'll say you're surrendering to yourself because source is you. And it's like, this is a point to really like drill through your little head. Like, this is what he like really wants to get in there, is that like, there is no out there. There is no one else. Like, there is only you and what he calls your hologram. I can't really explain the quantum physics of it, but basically like what scientists have discovered is that all these tiny particles are almost like a bunch of tiny mirrors that like reflect images back to us. And so nothing is actually real. Everything that we're seeing is like this creation that, a lot of times we'd say, like, sometimes I think of it as like God's green earth, but like, you invented this is kind of what he's trying to say, is like it's, it's really hard to explain. And that's why I feel like I've been sitting with like my jaw on the floor for the last couple days, because I'm like, he's right. Like, none of this is actually real. We know that, like, when we are done with this life, we will return back to like our expanded self and back to the infinite, back to our infinitely powerful, infinitely abundant selves. But he kind of is just trying to like remind you that while you're here right now in this creation that you created because you're God, don't forget that you still are that infinitely powerful, infinitely abundant being. And yeah, that's kind of where things get really interesting, because he refers to like life. Basically, his analogy is that like we're playing the human game, and our expanded selves are are having a blast, even when things seem negative or not good. Like, imagine
Some of their favorite times.
Yeah, like imagine, he calls it like you're going to the Earth amusement park. You've decided, I'm going to go to the Earth amusement park and I'm going to play the human game, which he uses a lot of analogies, but I think it's really helpful to understand. But he calls it like the full immersion movie of the human game. So it's like you're putting on a movie, but instead of just sitting and watching it and kind of losing your sense of self, you're quite literally in it and experiencing it. And you created these 5 senses so that you could have a very real experience of it. But it's still not real. It's still a movie. And because it's a movie, you're the director, you're the producer, you casted it, you wrote it, like you created all the people in it. And that was a big one for me, actually, because the way he describes it is like, the people in your life are just saying and doing what you told them to say and do when you scripted your movie. And so, like, if you ever get like mad at someone for saying something to you, or, you know, I don't know, experience discomfort around what someone's saying or an interaction or whatever, you have to just remind yourself that you created that. I created this experience with this other person, because there's no other people, there's just me. I created this experience for my highest good and like for my highest enjoyment of this movie, basically, which he never talks about like soul growth or anything like that. But I like, my beliefs tell me that like that is like a driving force. That is like the driving force. It's like soul growth. We're all trying to evolve through, but we're also having a really fun time playing this game at the same time. So it was very long-winded, but it's interesting because this book is called like Busting Loose from the Money Game, right? But most of it, he's like not talking about money at all. And he kind of addresses it in the end, and he's like, this wasn't really about money, was it? It's like, no, not really. But he
isn't it though? Like, money is such a stand-in for literally anything.
Oh my God.
Anything you ever get hung up on wanting. It's all the same. Busting loose from the fill in the blank game. Like, money is just one thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And he addresses that too. Like, you could use this philosophy on pretty much anything. And it's like, you definitely, if it's intriguing to you, I encourage reading the book, because you really do need to read it like cover to cover, like start to finish. It's like there's progression of understanding in the things that he's presenting. But one of his other bigger concepts is that in life, in our human game, there is basically 2 phases. And in the first phase, we spend all this time trying to convince ourselves, and successfully convincing ourselves, that we are not the infinitely powerful and abundant being that we truly are. So we spend the first half of our lives keeping ourselves away from that truth and trying to do everything in our power to convince ourselves otherwise. And then when you reach a point of basically feeling like you're so unfulfilled, like maybe you have everything you could ever want on paper and it's not fulfilling, and you're like, what else is there? Like, is there more? And a lot of us find ourselves in places like that at different stages in our lives, whatever your life looks like. But you might find yourself in that place of wondering, like, there has to be more. There has to be more than this. And that's what he calls phase 2, which is where you let your expanded self lead you on this treasure hunt, Easter egg hunt of finding all the places where you stashed your power. And he calls them eggs, like Easter eggs, basically. And then it's this process of what I have equated with shadow work, because it's going back and revisiting, and you don't have to go searching for them. Your soul will lead you, your expanded self will lead you to these Easter eggs in your life where you stashed your power. Because in the first half of your life, like for example, with money, like maybe you've been telling yourself, I can't afford this, or I don't have enough money to do this thing, or whatever it is. You've basically just been like placing this limitation on yourself and convincing yourself. And he says to like congratulate yourself for how convincing you were of like good, like, can you believe that you created an illusion so convincing that you made yourself, an infinitely powerful being, believe that you weren't that infinitely powerful being? Like, that's wild. Good job. Congratulations. Like that's the curiosity that sparked the human game, basically, is what would happen if I, God, this infinitely powerful being, separated myself from my power? What would happen? And like, here we are living that question, finding out. Like, this is, so basically, like I've equated his Easter egg hunting process with shadow work. And he says that like we go around, we spend this second phase of our lives reclaiming our power from these like Easter eggs. And he has like, he calls it the process in the book. Hold on. Okay, I took notes on like the gist of this because it's basically what he's describing as doing shadow work. And so, yeah, I'm going to tell you what the process is. So basically, it's very short, but he says, and I think this is kind of like, I don't know, this is what's left me the most feeling changed and feeling like I have something to walk away with, to use, is he said, so you're going through life and a situation arises that makes you feel discomfort. Anything. It could be like you get a bill and you see money on, like, I owe this amount of money, and you go like, ooh, I don't, like, that's a lot of money. That's going to leave a dent, or like whatever it is. Somebody says something to you, makes you feel bad about yourself. You feel uncomfortable. Anything like that, he says, is an opportunity to reclaim your power. Because in order to have created that in your hologram, in your illusion, you had to apply some of your infinite energy, your infinite power to that to make it real. And by reclaiming your power from it, you're like undoing the structure and you're taking it back. So, so he says, when situations of discomfort arise, to like, number one, dive into it. Don't try and push it aside, but just dive head first right into the middle. And then tell yourself, I am the power and presence of God creating this. So like whatever resonates most with you. I think he gave a few different examples, and this is the one that he used that I liked, like I am the power and presence of God, but you can say whatever makes you feel powerful and remind you that like you are God and there's nothing that goes bigger than that. Then say, it's not real. It's completely made up. It's a creation of my consciousness, and I reclaim my power from this creation now. So you affirm that I am reclaiming my power from this creation. Important to note, it's this creation that I created, which is why I am able to reclaim my power from it. It's because I did this. And so he says, as I reclaim the power, I feel it coming back to me. And then pause and feel it. Like, this is the biggest point, is to like really make yourself feel it. Like, feel the power coming back to you. I feel it surging through me. Pause to feel the surge. Like, feel it. And it says, as I feel it surging through me, I feel myself expanding even more into who I really am, expressing even more of who I really am, the power and presence of God. And it says to feel yourself opening up into what he calls the infinite energy, which is yours and it's you. Replay the scene of whatever brought discomfort and take any leftover arising discomfort and dissolve it into the infinite energy, and repeat that until the discomfort has dissipated. And then he says to bask in the infinite energy. Once it's like the discomfort's gone and you're just left with that feeling of like infinity, to just kind of like bask in that for a minute, just kind of bathe in that, sit in that. And it says to appreciate how amazing of a creator you are, appreciate the creation, even if you have judged it in your world as being negative, and appreciate the value that you've received from it. Because the value, he says, with any situation that brings discomfort, it has great value because it gives you the opportunity to reclaim your power. And there's like nothing more valuable than that. And so that's kind of his main point. And you can see how applying that to money related situations where every time, like maybe time to pay rent and you like get the bill and you're looking at it and it brings up these feelings of discomfort, you get to remind yourself that I created this limitation to separate me from my infinite power. And like, wow, it was so convincing. Good job. Like I did that. I convinced myself that I was not an infinitely powerful being by creating this limitation that isn't real. It's not real. So yeah, I've been like, my head's kind of spinning. I need to like process a lot of this stuff because like there's just such a strong emphasis on like there's nothing that's real but you. And like, yes, this does, I would say like this includes other people. He says that like you create other people in your world, but like, okay, in my hologram, I'm the only person with any real power because like I'm the main character of my movie. But in your movie, you're the main character and I'm just like a side character and then everyone else is an extra. But like when you go to a restaurant or something like that, you're an extra in a lot of people's movies in that moment. And it's all important, you know, like it all serves to what he says, like make the hologram real. But really it's just about you, which is funny to think about because again, this is like the dilemma I've presented you with of feeling like, am I allowed to feel special?
I was literally just going to say that. I'm like, so where are you at on allowing yourself to feel special?
And because he comes in here and he's like, yeah, you're so special. Like, just because everyone else is special doesn't make you any less special.
Absolutely. Yes.
Special. Yeah.
Yes. There's a frequency to like what you mean when you say we're all special, because yeah, you can easily use that to like downplay your own specialness, or you can imply that like, no, I feel my God self and I know that everyone has this God self. Like, no, we're all special. There's like a whole different frequency to like owning yours and letting everybody else have theirs, and versus like, meh, we're all special. So basically none of it matters. Like,
exactly.
That's not what it means.
I don't know. Yeah. Like just because like, I don't know, maybe you're like an Olympic gold medalist, just because there are other people who are Olympic gold medalists doesn't make your achievement any less special. Right.
That's a good example.
You still have a gold medal and it is yours for your work. And like, we're all our own God, basically. So there's a point where he brings up like law of attraction and tries to like call it out as like, he calls it like a phase 1 creation. But I think, so what I think he means is that there's a missing piece that often leaves people feeling a little more disconnected, or like that's like a final barrier to like really surrendering and like experiencing that connection, which is to like try and surrender your power to something bigger than yourself when there's literally nothing bigger than yourself. So, because like he's trying to really ingrain that everything is like you are the umbrella that encompasses everything. Like you created the cosmos. Like for me with astrology, like he would tell me astrology is fake. And then I would be like, come at me. You want to tell me astrology is fake? Like I'll fight you.
But it is like, I totally see what he means about that one, because kind of like what we were talking about the other day with like, you and I are like studying the archetypes ahead of time to create content for while it's happening. And so we're tapping into this energy, even though it's not real right now.
Yeah.
But we're accessing it to make the content. So then, yeah. So I get that part.
Exactly.
The part that I don't, or that like definitely was separate from like, you know, like you said, like what I've found to be true for myself is like, I don't see law of attraction. I mean, I get maybe what he's saying is like law of attraction is this power that's like matching things up with like attracts like or whatever else. But like, I don't surrender to that power, because that doesn't make any sense to me, because then you're just saying like, well, I guess I am what I am and it's just always going to match me. But like, no, because I put the power inside myself to like sculpt my inner world and create my frequency the way I want it to be. And I do see that absolutely everything in my life reflects my frequency back to me.
Exactly.
Like we've talked about relationships a lot lately with like Venus, and every single person you meet is just that reflection. Dolores Cannon calls them backdrop people in her work. If you Google like Dolores Cannon backdrop people, it's this idea that like, are they real or did you create them? Because they're playing a character in your movie.
Extras.
And you know, and like, I know that you were kind enough to like write me a testimonial for my website or whatever. And it was like, brought me to freaking tears, because it was the kindest thing I've ever read. And all of that to say, you created me. You created me as a character in your movie, and like vice versa. Like you're playing the part that like I asked you to play, and I'm playing the part that you asked me to play. And like,
exactly. You're saying exactly
then it's
what
like,
I told
okay,
you to say.
exactly. Like exactly when I wanted you to show up, and exactly what I wanted you to say, and all of it. Like you showed up perfectly in the exact right time. And it's so easy for us to acknowledge that here, because our relationship feels so good and it's divinely timed and harmonious and all of this. And then you look at all the troublemakers in your life and see if you can stretch it on over to them. Like, can you be just as grateful for what they showed up and when they said what they said? And but that makes so much sense, that like every ounce of contrast, it's just a reflection of you. It's part of what you came here for. And that quote that I texted you this morning that I got out of a podcast episode, it said, we can't know peace if we don't know the opposite. And so much of what we manifest in our life is just like the phase one part, where we're trying to fight with the physical manifestations instead of understanding that like, no, it's just you. Like, it's just
like you made the whole thing.
That's it. That's all there is. Which is just, I mean, that's definitely getting out there as far as I feel like what the human mind in today's consciousness is like ready to comprehend. I feel like we're getting pretty close to the leading edge with these kinds of ideas, as far as like, you are God and the whole world is just your experience like of God.
Right. And as God, you created all of it. All of it. You created all of it. Yeah. Just even all the things that you think are bad, you know, you're like, why would anyone want this? It's like, you actually created it though. So
yeah,
you can acknowledge that from your perspective, where you are now here in the Earth amusement park, you know, whatever, playing the human game. Or I like the Earth school too. Like that's the more common analogy, is the Earth school. But I like it as an amusement park too. That's pretty fun. He's like, there's all kinds of games you can play. You could play the farmer game. You could play the business game. You could play, like, there's all these games. And if you look around you, there's people playing all kinds of games that like you're not necessarily playing. But that's fine. Like they're playing the professional athlete game, and who am I to judge you for wanting to play that game? I'm here playing my game, you know, which is for me like I don't know, like I've been trying to sit here and think about this, like with astrology and everything. It's like, okay, so if I am God, I created the cosmos, which means I created astrology, and that therefore it is fake, but in the same way that like me sitting here right now is also fake. You know, like it feels pretty real to me from where I'm at right now, but I acknowledge that I created it. Yeah. But then again, like
a word that I think it's an imperfect capturing of like what it really is.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to clarify it, but it's like, it's really not fake. It is real, but it's real in the sense of like, information is real, like text on a page is real, versus like, it's not who you are. It's not your identity. And that's, I think, maybe phase one, where you're like really identifying with the hologram itself. You're like trying to earn the money so you can pay the rent. And you're like caught in that back and forth of like, earn the money, pay the rent, earn the money, pay the rent. Like, versus this is all just an illusion of like exactly the contrast that I need for my soul to break free in the way that it meant to break free by coming into this life. Like I scripted the perfect contrast for the comeback that I want to have, right? Like every good plot has, you got to set up the story like at the beginning.
Yeah.
And that's actually like something I will say, as far as kind of going back to what you said about once you have everything on paper and then you look around your life and you've never been more miserable or alone, or like my life is truly meaningless, and yet on the surface you have everything. And that is a painful point to be, because at that point you've basically exhausted everything you've ever been taught about what is happiness.
Yeah.
And you're left standing there like none of it fucking works.
Yep.
That's like a really disillusioning moment in time, and I've lived through that moment. And after that, like I had this point where like, okay, so I know money isn't it, and so I quit my job and go this way and down an entrepreneurship path. And along that path I basically like ran out of money, not like fully, but down to a level where it was below what I was comfortable with. And I would say like I found more peace and abundance through this path of like barely making enough money than I had up here, like making all this money, buying all the things that are supposed to equal happiness. Like I think all those things just end up blocking you from understanding like what it really is, and that you honestly have a better shot at finding true abundance from poverty than you do from having a lot of money in the physical. Mm-hmm. And right. That like once you find what it really is inside of yourself, like it's a state of being inside yourself. The money is here. Like you just have to access it. You just have to get on the frequency of it. And then right. It's like as abundant as it needs to be.
Exactly.
But yeah, that it's a process. And again, anything that you want, that's a long time coming. Like a relationship is probably another thing that people get in that cycle. What would you say? This is something that I see every once in a while when you're in the spiritual astrology community, and it keeps coming back to me. So I feel like maybe you have a perspective on it. But when people say that they know that this is their last lifetime and that they don't want to come back, what do you make of that? Like, how does that land for you?
Yeah, I've definitely heard that. And then I guess like something that comes to my mind on the other side, where there's this, I guess long story short, there's this like deep trance, like medium person who I like follow their work. Her name is April Crawford, and she channels like the being that she channels is like, she named it Veronica, which is kind of funny, but like my uncle actually put me onto this. And so I get like these, I know it's funny, we've like kind of connected on this kind of stuff. But I'm like on her newsletter or whatever, and I get her, people send her questions like, Dear Veronica. And then she goes into her trance and she channels this, like, she calls it like a being on like the causal plane or something. But anyway, like there was once a question that was like, I don't know if it was a question or if it was just like the intro part where she just kind of has a message. And part of that message was like, once you know, have achieved like your human evolution, highest level, whatever, and you do move out of this physical realm, like usually it's at that point that you appreciate how like just like how amazing it is here. Like a lot of people think like, oh, it's so bad here in the earth realm, in the 3D, it's like this demotion, almost like something to be evolved out of, basically. And like what this was saying was like, no, that's not the case at all. It's all about your perspective. And to me, like when people say something like that, there's like a tiny shift in perspective that needs to happen of like, but you are here right now. Like you might think maybe who am I to say, like, if you have like some sort of intuition that this is your last life or whatever, like, okay. But if you're trying, like you're wanting this to be your last life, you're wanting to evolve above, away from this realm, like think twice about that, because there's actually a lot of like this realm is like we give it a really bad rap, but it's really amazing. Like this creation of like where we are right now and the growth and the evolvement that we're able to achieve here is really amazing. And like once you again, like once you kind of enter this more like what he calls like a phase 2 perspective, that like you are God and you're like on this big playground, this amusement park, things get really fun. Like this realm is incredible. Think about all the different things you can do and all the different ways you can like play and have fun.
Yeah.
And then like it kind of comes back again to this idea that I keep being reminded of by like my guides is like, just be light, like be lighthearted. I know that things seem really bad here sometimes, but it's not like that. Like you need to like kind of bring your perspective above that and look at the big picture, which is what this book feels like, is like really looking at like the biggest of the big pictures and then reminding yourself that it's not that serious. It's really not that serious. Like, just have fun. You're here to play and to be joyful and to achieve growth along the way. But, you know, like if your perspective is that like things are terrible here, I'm really high in my level of evolution and I'm going to be out of here soon, then like you're missing an opportunity to appreciate everything around you.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is the biggest piece, is like, I don't know. I mean, that's just to learn to like see things for what they really are here, you know, which is like not as bad as we think they are.
Well, and it goes back to what you were saying of like, you know, you made it all.
You made
so
it. Yeah.
If you're living a life where your conclusion is, I hope I never come back here, then yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're in phase 1 of the script that you wrote for your soul's evolution. And like, it makes sense. I mean, I was suicidal multiple times during phase 1 of like, I don't know how to do this. Like, I don't get it. I don't know how to play this game, because it doesn't freaking make sense. Everything's a reflection. Everything is moving around. Like as you seek it, it like is, oh my gosh, like it just doesn't, it's not real. You're trying to move things around in the physical and it just doesn't ever work out. And then you turn inward and you start moving things around in your inner world and like let that become a beautiful place that you love to be. And then the whole world is a beautiful place that you love to be. Like Dolores Cannon in her book, she says, like the aliens or whoever she's having channeled through whatever subject it was, I'm pretty sure it was extraterrestrial, told her that the Earth experiment, originally the Earth was designed to be a paradise. That like, that's why we're here. This is paradise. This is like the closest thing that physically has ever come close to paradise. And she kind of goes on to talk about like the old Earth versus the new Earth. But one image that she says about the new Earth is that in the new Earth, everything sparkles. And have you ever walked out in the morning and there's like dew on everything, or a snow, or like even the grass sometimes like freaking catches the light just right and it looks like it's sparkling? Like all the time now I see the earth sparkling and I'm like, this is paradise. Right. This is like, we're in paradise. Take a big deep breath. This is paradise. And so, yeah, it's like, I didn't have all the depth that you were able to put to it. So I'm glad I asked, because all I could really feel was like, that doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
I don't feel like that's ahead of me. That feels like it has resistance. Like if you don't like it and you don't want to come back, like you're having a reflection of something inside you that's not resolved yet, you know, like exactly. Is what it sounds like. I don't know. Probably everybody's different, but
yeah,
sometimes like
journeys. I mean, like you said, seeing everything sparkle is like, that's a perspective change. Like the world itself did not change. Your perspective of it did. So it's like
creation changed.
Because you changed. Right. So it's like, I guess like, yeah, it did change, but it's because you did, you know?
But even so, it's like, okay, so my world changed. And that doesn't guarantee that anybody else's world did.
Right.
Everybody else can still live in whatever world they want, and I'm over here. And then you have like, you know, okay, so I'm over here from inside my world, kind of like where our worlds are colliding, and here we're sharing this space in between our worlds. And then people coming in and like watching the video, they get to step into this world.
Yeah.
and they get to spend time in here. So like we get to pop in and out of other people's worlds all day, every day. Like every single teacher, every single relationship, we're entering their world, and you either like it in there or you don't.
Right.
And it's like spend more time there or don't. Like get what you can get from inside their space, and like do what you can do that feels good and feels like you're being called into their space. But you don't like, it is still your creation. Like you don't have to hang around in places that don't feel good.
Right.
Like unless there's something there for your soul. And when we feel stuck, I feel like there's something there for our soul. And that's why we feel like we can't leave yet, because there's something in there that is working itself out.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting. Like with his philosophy, it's like, first and foremost, do what you feel like doing. Like that's how he says to like live every day is literally wake up, and he says like wait to see what gets dropped into your hologram by your expanded self. Like what's coming today, because everything's already planned out. So there's nothing you need to plan. There's nothing you need to proactively do. You just get to experience it, because guess what? You already did all of that work and now you're just here experiencing it. So stop trying to control everything and just wake up, wait and see what gets dropped into your hologram, and respond to it, whatever feels right. If it brings discomfort, if it arises discomfort within you, then he says that's when he says apply the process of like, remind yourself that I am the power and presence of God. This is not real. I created this. And in fact, this is a really amazing situation because I get to reclaim my power. Like I get to reclaim a little bit of my power from this. And that's that's the big thing to appreciate. Like, you know, it makes it easier to appreciate things that does stir up discomfort inside of us, because we get to see it as this opportunity to reclaim our power, you know. And like there's some really big things that seem really bad in this world that like I can't even fully speak to, because it's hard to wrap your head around like such horrible things, like I don't know, like the war going on and stuff like that being not real, and being like, oh, I created that. But you know, if it does bring discomfort, like apply that process and try to see like how much of your power you can reclaim from that, because you know everything that's happening is meant to be happening, and you created it. So you know, it's like take that power back.
Right. And contrast is how we do that. Like you have to bump up against the little seed of your power that you left out there so that you can reclaim it. And there's such a difference, because like us here, like we each are creating our awareness of the war, like our relationship with the war. We each have our own relationship. Every single individual person on the planet has their own relationship with what's happening in Ukraine right now. And again, we each get to move in and out of everybody else's worlds and pick up what you can pick up and learn what you can learn. And I mean, I feel like that, even though it's happening in Ukraine, so many of us have like expansion that we can take advantage of from the suffering that war is generating. But at the same time, like the Ukrainian people are reclaiming their power in a big way. Pretty much the whole world is reclaiming their power in a big way. Like how long have we been terrified of Russia? And like, we're getting to see that, wow, okay, so maybe our terror doesn't quite match up to like what they're actually capable of. Yeah. So like that disillusionment is happening for so many people. And like, right, we don't know through the course of time, like how all of this is actually going to unfold to serve the highest good. But like every single soul involved wrote their own script. Right. I genuinely believe that, like through any war ever, like the people who are the casualties, like that was their script. And who says they're not coming right back to be, you know, the children born on the heels of the war who rebuild the country afterwards? Like they can be right back. I mean, what is death? I mean, when you really get into it, is it real? What is death? Like, what are we really scared of? Because like, when you really get into like, when you pass, when your physical vessel expires, energy cannot be created or destroyed. So it's only transformed into non-physical energy. And now you're back in the soup that is the all. Like, you're still there, like you still exist, and then you come back and you get yourself a new vessel. Or when you listen to Dolores Cannon's books, like she's talking about other beings where they've figured out how to like basically put a vessel on life support and take their consciousness out of it so that their consciousness can go have like a human life. And then when they're done with their human life, their consciousness goes back to the vessel that was on life support and re-enters that vessel and continues its life. like regressing a human who is like she's like, where are you going when you die or whatever? And like, oh, but I'm going to go back to the ship because that's where my body is. But your body's here. No, that's my human body. This is my other body.
Yeah.
Like you might be in a nap, like a giant nap. This like his like Men in Black. Like, is this a dream? Is this just happening inside a locker at a subway station for aliens? Like, like
yeah.
Like on that
the Matrix. Like, he calls this whole thing. He's like, your life is the Truman Show and you live in the Matrix. Get it straight. Like that's the truth. Literally.
Matrix was a documentary. Like that's they don't want you to know about that, but they had to like dramatize it so that they could actually publish
majorly
it.
dramatize.
They're telling you that this is how it works, and I believe that. Like we are plugged in to a simulation. This Earth school is a simulation.
We created. Right. Yeah. And it's like a simulation. It's not like you're some powerless, like you had no control. And no, like you, not only did you choose to be here, but you like created this world because you're God.
Yeah.
Like you created it. And what I also, like my own reflections on reading this book and like absorbing this material is like, okay, he's implying that then there are other amusement parks besides Earth, right? Like, this is not the only amusement park then. You're telling me that there are other worlds, there are other universes. That, the same God that created this world, you created those ones too. But, okay, so we're implying that there are other amusement parks. So, like, there's aliens, right? And we're implying that just because you've had one avatar, like an avatar, whatever, in this hologram, like doesn't mean you haven't done it before. So reincarnation, like that's what we call it, like from our perspective. But I mean, that would just be like for example, there's this one game that I like to play. It's called Stardew Valley. And it's like a game where you're a farmer, which is funny because if you watch Farmer John Heart, I talk about doing a past life regression to a life where I was a farmer. So obviously I like playing the farmer game, like whether it's the real simulation or if it's like Stardew Valley, my little game that I play on my Nintendo Switch. But like what's my point? Oh yeah, that I've when I've played that game before, right? Like you play the game, you go to a certain point, you kind of reach a natural end. I decided to start a new file. I'm going to start a new file and I'm going to start over and I'm going to be a slightly different avatar, but I'm going to play the same game. But now me, the expanded self, the real version of this little farmer, that's the little character, I know now better than the first time. I know exactly how to start, what to do, because I've already played the game and I've already learned from a lot of mistakes. So in this next time I play and I'm going to start this new file, it's going to be way more efficient than the first one because I have learned a lot of lessons already and I know how to play the game better than I did before. And like, I think that's very true of like, I don't know how it factors into like remembering past lives and stuff. Like we have the whole like tabula rasa concept of like the clean slate when we're born. And bringing it back to like Ainsley MacLeod, he says like, if you think babies are a clean slate, you've obviously never met one. It's like what he says. But that's because like, yes, we have the clean slate of like your conscious memory being wiped, but there are some things deeper down because they are connected to your expanded self that you can tap into it. It's there. And he even in the book, he's even like, the subconscious mind is not real. And it's like, okay, well, that's because you think that everything is not real. Like technically nothing is real. We get it. It's like getting to a point of frustration with this guy. I was like, everything's fake. Okay, I get it. Stop.
Received. Enough of this.
But obviously there's this discomfort rising in me of like attachment to
Exactly.
things that make me feel anchored, that make me feel safe and secure. And so by releasing a little bit of that discomfort and reclaiming a little bit of my own power from that, I can see like being attached to things like that only serves to limit me from being like the infinitely abundant creator being that I am, that we all are. Oh, it's been a lot to digest.
It sounds like it. Sounds awesome to me.
Yeah, no, it's been crazy and perfectly timed. And I had this weird feeling when I was reading it. As soon as I started reading it, it felt like deja vu. I was like, I know I haven't read this before. Did I write this? And I was like, have I written something similar to this? Did I read something similar to this? And then he reminds you in the book, like, you created me and this book because you had like a need in your life or whatever.
Yeah. What do you think deja vu is?
There's a lot of theories on that. I haven't really I feel like every time I experience deja vu, it's such a brief flash of like familiarity, but I think it reminds me, it's like a reminder that you're in the right place or that you're doing the right thing, or just a reminder that everything's already been planned and that you were the one who planned it. And that's why it feels so familiar, is because you already wrote the script. So everything is as it should be, is usually the message I receive from that. But if you think about it, there's really never a time when things aren't as they should be. They always are.
Right.
But sometimes there are times when it's a little more poignant to have that reminder, I think.
Yeah. I don't have a good answer to that. I just was very curious.
Something to contemplate. That's something I've spent a lot of time contemplating, and I've never really arrived on a solid answer of like, what does deja vu really mean? It's like, at the very least, it serves as a good reminder of like how powerful you are, and that you're the director and the writer, the screenwriter, the actor, or whatever. You're all of those things in your own movie. And so if it feels a little bit familiar sometimes, like, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
It's all the plan.
Yeah. It's not like God's plan, it's your plan. It is God's plan, but it is also your plan. It's all
because you're God.
Because you're
right.
Yeah.
Because you're God. That's just crazy, because yes, you were just a couple weeks ago, like, we were talking about, am I allowed to be special? And now here's this book that like has like
I manifested this into my reality. And he says this, like, I think that's what he did it for sure. Straight up. It's like, here's the exact words you needed to hear and the exact thing you needed to be reminded of. Here's this book that says it's about money, but it's like not. It's like pretty much not about money. And like the guy who wrote the book is his own, he's got his own hologram. He's got his own life, and he's the star of the show. And there is no me. Like, I'm not a factor into that. He says, like, you're never doing anything for anyone else. There is no out there. There is no one out there. Like, he wrote the book for him, for his highest enjoyment of life. And for me, I like manifested this book, created it into my life because I had a need, but it has nothing to do with him. He didn't write it for me, Yeah. It's like, it's very interesting. He's like, congratulations on creating this book. I hope it helped. Like, thanks. It's like, you did that. Like, thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. You're such a good guy, Bob. Oh my God. Yeah. That actually reminds me of like, that understanding was something that I spent a lot of time marinating in when I first moved into this house, because the couple who built it in 2009, and they got divorced shortly after they built it. So they didn't live here, but like a year and a half, maybe. And then they rented it out to one person for the last like however many years. And then I bought it in like a few years ago, whatever. And it really was not lost on me that like, I feel like they built this for me. Like every single thing about it, from the minute I walked in, I was like, that's my favorite. No, that's my favorite. No, that's my favorite. No, oh my God, it's got this. And it was like everything that if I had built it myself, I wouldn't have even sprung for all of these little added features that I know they paid more to have it be like that. And I'm so glad because now I get to live with it, and they built my house for me. That was the path of least resistance, was not for me to build it, but for them to build it. And so they did that for me. And, you know, they went on with their lives. They were my backdrop people. You know, 10 years before I came back here, they're here setting up the stage so that once I get here 8, 9, 10 years from now, it's all ready to go for me. It's like, who's out there right now building your house for where you're going to be 10 years from now? Like all these cooperative components that are out there laying the foundation so that your life is the perfect reflection of exactly what you want it to be. Like we can manifest any life we want. Like you're saying, like, you know, okay, so you're short on money. So create another person to pay you something.
Literally.
Like, create a person to buy your shit. Like, it's not hard. Like, just create that person. And that's where so many people would like insert argument here for like why that's not true.
Exactly.
And it's like, okay, yeah, rise back above. Go phase 1 to phase 2.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, to stop defending your limitations, you know, like
arguing for your limitations.
Yeah. And that's what he says. Like, you know, that's what we do so successfully for the first phase of our lives, which is, I think I would say probably for most people, it's more than half. I feel like
I don't ever get out of the first phase.
Some people probably really don't ever, or at least like, because then again, this brings me to a more like zoomed out perspective of multiple lives and thinking like, okay, well, maybe there's like a phase 1 through the first however many lives. And then eventually you reach the point where you're ready to turn around and say, I created all these limitations. And that's actually just more proof that I am so powerful. So infinitely powerful. The fact that I could create these limitations and create this super convincing illusion that I'm not powerful, that I'm not God. It's like, how much does it take for God to convince itself that it is not God? Like, that's what we're doing right now. And, you know, like the money example is interesting. Because it's such a big part of like the human game. You know, it's very uncommon to be a human playing this human game and to be separated from the money game. Like, there really is not much of a separation. It's very intertwined. Most of us are playing the game, but he says, like, you can stop playing the game because that's how powerful you are. And the more and more you reclaim your power from like these eggs. So to me, like, the more shadow work that you do and the more you step into your own highest frequency, you're aligning with your expanded self. That's like, yeah, like create a person to buy your stuff that you're selling. And like, I mean, he says it's hard for me to like verbalize what he has to say about like the actual busting loose from the money game part. It's really like hard to comprehend, but he does describe this like busting loose point that once you cross this threshold, he's like, stop. You don't even look at your like bank account numbers anymore because you know that they're not real. And that even by like the process of looking and checking, you've like taken infinity and you've made it finite and you've turned it into a sequence of numbers. But if you were to just not even look and not even like create that in your reality, then it remains infinite. So he's like, you have to just, what does he call it? Cosmic overdraft protection. So what he calls it is like, once you cross this busting loose threshold, is like you fully surrender to and trust in this cosmic overdraft protection, where when you're spending money, what you're really doing is showing appreciation for the creations that you're indulging in. And like, you know, like you go out and you have a really great meal and it costs X amount of dollars, and then you tip really well because you enjoyed it so much and because it brought you so much joy and pleasure and it was just so great. And that's all that money is expressing appreciation. It's just a symbolic, like money is the symbol for expressing appreciation, and that would exist without money. Like, we would still express appreciation for enjoying other people's creations and all that good stuff. So he's like, you just keep on expressing appreciation, but forget the money part of it. That's not even part of the equation anymore. And like the universe has got you because you are the universe.
Yeah.
You already created this life. So anything that's meant to be will be, and you will have enough money to do it because it's meant to be.
Yeah.
But it also, it requires, like, you know, he says once you've reached this point, you're not trying to change or improve anything in your life. You're not trying to have more money. That's not the point. That's like not the point, because you've reached a point where that doesn't matter anymore. You just trust that you'll have enough to do the things that you want to do. Because if you feel motivated and inspired to do it, then it's meant for you. And if it's meant for you, the money's there. Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, you don't need to act like you have control over it, because technically you don't. And he's like saying, you know, his phase one involved a lot of like business ventures where he made tons of money, and then also had the experience of losing it all really, really rapidly, and how you could have the biggest bank account number in the world and it could be gone tomorrow because it's not real.
Yeah.
It's not real. So, you know, I had shared with you the idea of like expressing appreciation rather than spending money. And it's, to me, that's like a major, if you were to do nothing else and take nothing away from this book, I feel like that's a really concrete takeaway to like shift that internal language. And if possible, like your external language. He does say like, it's hard to communicate with people when instead of saying pay rent, you're saying express appreciation. People are like, what are you talking about? You know, like, like, how much does this cost? You would ask, what's the requested amount of appreciation or whatever for this creation? And so you can at least speak to yourself that way. And you can have, instead of dread, you can have enjoyment and excitement around paying for things, because it's not, you're not losing anything. That's what he really emphasizes. It's like, when you spend money, you're not losing anything.
Right. You're trading.
You're trading. You received such enjoyment, such whatever it was, and you're expressing your appreciation for it. And he says, like, once you start doing this, he's like, imagine you go to the casino and you sit down at a slot machine and you put in $1 and it brings you back $3 instantly, every time, every single time. Like, you're going to just sit down at that machine, right? And just keep on feeding it $1 because you know you're going to get $3 in return. And he's like, it's like that. It's like when you start being stingy and you're holding on to your money because you think that you're losing something by giving it, you're not allowing the $3 in return to come back to you. So keep putting in the dollar, and your investment, like your return is going to be higher. Like what goes around comes around. Like, not spending money and saving or hoarding money is actually like counterintuitive, I guess, to being abundant.
Yeah. Well, and that reminds me of something that my financial advisor was telling me one time when I was asking about the risk in the stock market. Like, it was looking very volatile, and just, I'm like, I don't know if I trust that. Like, I don't know if that's what the safest place to put my money. Maybe I just want to save it or move it to like a super low risk investment of some kind. And he's like, actually, super low risk carries a risk all by itself, because inflation is going up every day. And if you're putting your money someplace where it's only earning 1% interest and inflation is 10%, then your money is becoming worthless in that low risk spot where you just put it, versus if you put it in the stock market, you have access to a potential gain of 10, 15, 20%, maybe more, depending on what you're investing in. And so you have the opportunity at least to keep pace with the market. Now, whether that all sounds right or wrong as far as like how it should be, I don't know, but it definitely made sense as far as like even low risk options like hoarding your money have their own risk. And Abraham talks about it like air. Like, you wouldn't only inhale. Yeah. That doesn't make any sense. Like, you would exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale. And your money, your bank account is the same thing.
Yeah.
Money in, money out, money in, money out. And like, yeah, that's beautiful that like you traded it because I want this. I got this and I gave away this in order to get it. And that's the part where, yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to get hung up on rent, and it's like, that's $1,000 less that I have now. And oh my gosh, what am I going to do? But like, meanwhile, you're having that panic attack inside your warm shelter, and like, you're not homeless. So like, you know, it wasn't a complete loss.
It's like one of my biggest, that was such a big perspective shift for me. I was like, I needed to hear that one for sure, because like, yeah, I mean, like, it's easy to, especially with like rent. I specifically mentioned rent because that's always like the biggest payment of the month, you know, like it comes every single month. It is large. And that's like the more stressful one, at least for me. And it's like, sure, okay, I can totally see where I'm coming from, give myself credit for that, but also haven't been acknowledging what an amazing monthly opportunity it is to appreciate everything I have and to express, not just to appreciate it, but to express appreciation for it. You know, like whatever requested amount that is, like I'm happy to express appreciation for where I live and for the fact that I'm able to like live in an apartment and like have the things that I have, you know, like that is something to be grateful for. And even like, you know, when you say like be grateful to have like a warm shower or to like have running water in your shower, it's like it's so simple and it's so easily overlooked, but like yes, that is such a huge perspective shift because that like majorly alters your frequency when you're practicing gratitude for such small things like that. And gratitude is like so high vibration. That's such a high frequency energy to just be in a state of gratitude and receptivity like that.
Well, like I think gratitude communicates to the universe, I have enough.
Yeah.
And so like, you know, you created everything. So basically when you exude gratitude or when you're holding yourself in that vibration, your whole world is enough. And it's like focusing yourself on purpose on all the different ways that you have enough is only going to breed more enoughness throughout every aspect of your life. And lack is just a reality that we create for ourselves sometimes so that we can learn where true abundance comes from, I think. So like, as you say, like, you know, rent is my biggest expense and it's the most stressful. And like all of that is like so factual versus like the reality I've created so far sets me up with this payment that every month I go through this discomfort. And now I'm realizing like, let it be fluid. Like I think about my parents, like, cause they're, you know, the same. They just like wake up every day and like create the same life, like decade after decade.
Yeah.
And it's like so many people do that. And yet I think it can change. It is changing like moment by moment by moment. And if we can loosen our perspective on what our life even is, like, it's not real. It's like, it's not that just
accordingly. Yeah.
So we get so twirled up in the conditions and the physical manifestations sometimes that we can definitely lose touch with that. But I think there's, I mean,
I feel the need to mention this movie, that movie with Ryan Reynolds, Free Guy, where he's like in a video game and he's like an NPC or whatever, like a non-player character where they're just like background literally. And then he like gains this self-awareness and realizes like, because he does the same thing every single day, yada, 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 because he's like non-player character, he's just background. But then he like gains this self-awareness and he starts like, he tries to order something different at the coffee shop and they like stare at him like, there's only one option because you don't actually order because this is the planned interaction and it's not real. And like, he like gains this self-awareness and decides like, I'm going to be the creator of my own life, basically. Yeah. Which is like, it's like kind of a goofy, like silly movie. But again, it's like this idea that, you know, like, I don't know. It's like we are the same thing. Like if you're treating yourself like an NPC, like don't forget you're the main character of your game. Like, you know, you're the star of your movie. So don't like, I don't know. We find ourselves falling into those routines and those patterns that the basic assumption is that we have no power and that this is just what it is. But once you remind yourself of that power that you inherently have, you get to change things because you're the creator, which was really cool.
Well, and I love that how like, okay, so he decided on the inside, I'm going to create my own reality. And here he goes to the coffee shop where they know him and they're like, no, like you don't get to be different. Like I expect you to be like this. So this is all I'm willing to accept from you. And that is such a fantastic analogy for what your life will do to you the second you decide to become the creator of your own shit, because they're on a pattern with you. They have you down. They have you figured out. You don't need to change. You're fine like you are, because that would require me updating my paperwork. And that's just not going to happen. So don't be surprised if there's some pushback in your life from all the people telling you who you are and that, oh, you're different now. Like, well, I'm more me. Is that different? Really? Like,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like, because when you change, again, your world, the people around you are a reflection of this. So like any part of you that's still unsure, that's still resistant, that's going to be mirrored back to you so hard. And like, you're going to have to work through it, because that's how you work through it internally is, like we use the people around us and it helps us process. And sometimes it'll show you that little bit of doubt you still have by a person who is doubting you or pushing back. And he does describe in the book too, like once you've really entered, like you've committed to this phase 2 game where you're deprogramming the eggs, like what's like basically what he says, you're deprogramming all of your Easter eggs, letting your expanded self take you on you don't have to go looking for them. And I think if you've practiced shadow work, that it arises in the right time, the right things. It does. And you don't have to go looking for anything, but like shit gets weird. Like he says, like once you really cross this threshold, like weird things are going to start happening to show you how powerful you are. Basically, it's like an affirmation. And it's not to show you, but it will show you.
Yeah.
Because you're reclaiming your own power and it's going to be reflected back to you. And so like, don't be surprised.
There we go.
That's hilarious. So I'm talking about weird things happening and being reflected and whatnot. And then this weird, like Zoom just decides it's done. Nope.
Yeah. Nope.
Weird. So again, I don't get it, but I don't know. That felt weird. That's never happened before. But it's like basically expect the unexpected. Expect things that have never happened before to just happen and go with it. Just go with it.
So like one thing that I feel like is part of phase 2 is learning that when you have a question, like, am I allowed to be special? How special am I? Like whatever the question is, that like really that kind of a question is a preview of the life you're about to live. Like the question is a guarantee that the answer is right behind it. So like anytime, and I feel like people can get kind of lost in their questions and like, what is my purpose, or, big questions that those are hard things to answer, versus like day to day, what's at the top of your consciousness? Not like every single thing that you ever want to do, but like today at the top of my consciousness is, am I really special? Like, am I allowed to be special? Like those little nuggets rise to the top. And it's like, the timing of when the question rises is indicative of like the answer is right here. Mm-hmm. Like the answer doesn't make any sense if you don't have a question that's like the question is the tensing and the answer is this relaxing. Yeah. So like tense and then relax and then tense and then relax. And like that's what keeps life interesting. Yeah. So like I think there's so many things that happen to us that are showing us what's coming in the future. And so often we hold off what's coming in the future because we're trying to demand that we have it right now today. Mm-hmm. And exactly. It's like, no, like let that be a signal of like what's to come. Like let it unfold piece by piece by piece by piece. Like just because you don't have the whole thing like right now today doesn't mean that like it's not unfolding in its own time.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Like remember that, if we're going to look at life as a movie, you wouldn't sit down in a movie theater and all of a sudden everything's all like, it starts, the movie started, here we go. And then now everything's all resolved and the guy got the girl and they're all, everything worked out and it's all great and credits and the end. Like, no, we came here to watch the progression.
Yes.
Yes. It's not all going to happen at one time. And it's not supposed to be like that. We're meant to experience the unfolding and the process. It's just that like, you can remind yourself that you, as your expanded self, you do have the whole picture. You may not be fully consciously aware of it from where you are in this moment, but you can trust that it's there and that things will unfold in divine timing and exactly as you planned it. But like you're in your movie right now. So like we're doing this step by step.
Yeah.
And we're not going to have everything all at once. But it's coming.
You wouldn't want everything all at once.
You wouldn't want it. It would be the worst movie you ever went to go see. Like you would hate it. It would suck.
It was a second long. Like what the hell? Yeah. No, that's not fun.
the other big thing about movies and stories is like there has to be a conflict, you know, like there has to be a lot of conflict and things that don't feel like, you know, maybe I wouldn't want to, I don't know why the example comes to my mind of Game of Thrones, wouldn't want to live it, but I like to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, but that's like kind of what we're doing right now is we are watching the movie by living it. Like we're not actually really here. It's a weird thing to like really wrap your head around. But we've created this like incredibly experiential illusion that we get to have these, like, it's like you do get to watch Game of Thrones and literally live it and like absorb all of that and like be a part of it. Like that's pretty cool. If you could, I was going to say, if you could actually partake in a full immersion movie, would you? It's like, well, the answer is yes, because you're here right now, but
right. You're alive.
You're alive and you're here. And this is your full immersion movie experience.
Yes. Yes.
But don't forget that you created it. And therefore there's nothing to be worried about. Like sometimes I just need to remind myself that when I feel anxious and I feel like, oh my God, like things are not how they're supposed to be. It's like, they are.
They are.
They are. And there you can just sort of find that it is a very like, with all the Taurus themes right now that are going on, I mean, like this sense of inner peace, I feel like this has brought me a new level of that, of like just accepting that like I created this and therefore everything is okay. It's all okay. This is all exactly how it was supposed to be. And we can all just kind of like relax and take a deep breath and surrender to that. You know, it feels really good. So I recommend it if you're able to like loosen the grasp, you know, on like the way things are and just practice a little trust in your expanded self. Like I do know how hard it is. It's hard to reach that point, but like I also believe that if you're listening to this right now, then you created this too, and like there's absolutely something in it for you. Like you created
like an
having this conversation like in your world. Yeah. So congrats.
Congrats on creating this conversation. Well done.
Kind of hilarious. I mean, that's actually so. It was funny that you sent me, I haven't listened to it yet, but the Deja Vu podcast episode where they're talking about money.
Yes.
I discovered this book from the third episode of that podcast where they also are talking about money.
Oh my gosh, I don't know if I've ever listened to that one. I'll have to check it
was funny because I tend to listen to podcasts when I'm like cleaning or doing laundry or whatever it is. And the other day, this also has helped me to trust that whenever I feel motivated to like fold and put away the laundry that's been sitting clean in baskets for a few days, you know, like won't be, I'm not going to lie about that. I'll just be honest with you that happens. But I can trust in the timing of that because it's really helped me actually with that. Like when I feel motivated to put away the laundry, it's time for me to listen to a podcast and it's going to lead me to something. And I just kind of like, because I had listened to the first episode of her podcast and I just kind of let it go into the second one. And then I just kind of let it go into the third one and I didn't really look at what it was, but it definitely was one that I probably wouldn't have normally chosen on my own, but I ended up listening to it because I just was sort of letting it play the next one. And this whole conversation was about abundance and it was about like, I guess like manifesting abundance and I don't know, but she was talking to someone else who like, they live on this property in California and they call it like the mother tree. So it's kind of the whole process of how they ended up and how Blue like manifested this property into her life, which actually, this is something that I want to try one day. I think this is a really cool idea. But what she did was basically she rented out an Airbnb for a few days that was everything she wanted in like a new place to live. And during that time, those few days when she was there, she acted like it was her place. She was like, you know, walking in the door like, yes, welcome home, Blue. It feels so great to be here. Love my home, you know, like pretending that it was her house. And then within a few, I don't know, days or weeks of coming home, she gets a call from a friend like, hey, do you want to come look at this like cabin in the woods property? It's exactly what she was looking for, like a little cabin in the woods, not too far from the city, all this stuff, everything. Like she had manifested this. So very interesting. But then there's this other person that she was talking to who lives on the property and she recommended this book, that I ended up reading. And after they were talking about it, it was one of those things where I just like bought it, which is something I don't normally do. Normally I sit and think about things and overthink it for a really long time. But there was something about this that was like, I definitely need to read this book. And I'm not normally drawn to things that are like talking about the subject of money or abundance, which is funny because maybe I'll put my birth chart up on the screen when I edit this, but I have like a major second house stellium going on, like a lot of second house action going on. And I guess that's another point to like be aware of, is sometimes things don't resonate with you. And that is a reason to explore them because you have a block up in front of it. And this is something I learned when I started getting into crystals. And like when you buy crystals, like you have to really feel the energy in your hand and like pick it up and go towards what you're drawn to and all that. But they also tell you to pay close attention to what you're not drawn to. The ones where you look at it and you don't even think twice. Because for me, those are often ones that have to do with, it's something that like you don't want to go there. It's a mental block, if that makes sense. You're blocking your own internal resonance from it. But that's kind of how I feel with like things that are related to like money and wealth and those sorts of things where I'm kind of just like, money, I don't like that. Like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to do that. Just not drawn to it. But I feel like there was a reason because there's like a huge block there, which is again, like I end up listening to this podcast by default. It just came on. I wouldn't have chosen it, but I needed to hear it. There was something I needed inside of it. And then again, leads me to this book. And then I devoured this book in like a day and a half. And I sat there with my jaw on the floor for the next like 3 days. And it's just one of those things where, follow your resonance, but also be aware of the things you're leaving behind in that process, I guess. A learning experience.
Dude, I love that. Like the pieces that we are meant to have, they find their way to us no matter what.
They do.
Like kind of similar to that, when I started my journey into entrepreneurship, it was kind of like blue in the house. Like I just pretended like, here's how I want to feel inside my business. And let me make focus wheel after focus wheel after focus wheel of just like, how do I want this to be? And then somebody calls and is like, hey, do you want to open a grocery store? And I'm like, never thought about that. But yes, as a matter of fact, there's nothing I would rather do. And like, you just don't even know until it shows up, like how the piece is going to be wrapped. But your intuition, your resonance will always, always light it up for you. Like you're never going to miss the path that was meant for you. And I feel like so many people are like, freaking out about what's my purpose or like, what am I really supposed to do? And, am I making a difference? Am I doing it right? And all of that is like, I mean, that's just the program that has the piece of what you need to learn, which is that it's actually impossible to do it wrong. Like your purpose is to kind of stop asking what your purpose is and to enjoy your life to the point where you don't care what your purpose is. You're so on fire with like, I'm so glad to be alive.
Yeah.
Totally. Maybe me speaking with my own, like my path is that, because at the bottom of my gene keys chart, like the activation path is the main zigzag through your gene keys. And at the very bottom of the chart is the purpose bubble. And my purpose is gene key 46, which is transforming the shadow of seriousness and doing that through the gift of delight and reaching the divine gift level of ecstasy. So that's my purpose, is to literally like be freaking happy. So I'm like, okay, great. I'm on the right track. So when we think about our purpose, everybody's like thinking of it more as a job, like where should I go be hired? Like, who am I supposed to help? Like, what's my purpose in that way? Versus like, when you look at the gene keys purpose, it is very much like a frequency that you are meant to reach inside yourself. And that puts you on this path to come together with the backdrop people who you scripted into your story, like whatever that looks like.
Exactly. You created.
That's just like one more way. That's probably my favorite way that I've ever seen purpose kind of incorporated, is like through that frequency of like my frequency or my purpose is to transform this shadow of seriousness.
Yeah. Shadow work being the name of the game and doing it with joy, because again, it's such an incredible opportunity to be able to reclaim your power. And I know that, I don't know I don't remember where it fell in my gene keys chart, but I do have the same one. And again,
Yes,
it's something I'm
it's
working through
really
is this like, be light, let your heart be light, like stop being so serious about everything. I need to tell myself this sometimes. And that's okay though. Like this is something I'm working through and this is part of my progression through this.
yes.
And I know
Yes.
that because I'm, like it gives me a lot of, I know the direction I'm going. The direction is from serious to ecstasy, same thing. And it's
Right.
like nothing in the outer world changes in that process. Well, it only does via changing internally. So it's all perspective. The night before this book arrived and I was going to read the book, I felt the urge to read the second one that you sent me. I was like, okay, I'm ready. And so this is the 61st gene key, the Holy of Holies is what they call it. But of course, and I am not surprised, that the themes match so well with the book that I read. And it was like the perfect complement to it, like the perfect precursor to read this chapter the night before. And one of the biggest points is, for one, God is pressure, which to me is so in line with this concept that when you feel discomfort, that is your power, your God power that you are able to reclaim. So to me, that like lined up perfectly, like God is pressure. And that's another one of the phrases that like he suggests, find something along the lines of like, I am the power and presence of God, like whatever resonates with you and makes you feel powerful and aligned with that energy. Like for me, one of those is God is pressure, because it reminds me when I feel that pressure, it's like, that's my power. That's my power. So that was a really big piece. But another one of the biggest pieces of this chapter, which was really interesting, had to do with the fact, like the transformation that humanity is undergoing, where we're kind of transitioning away from religion and a little bit more towards like a scientific perspective. But then there's also kind of the intermingling of both. But what we're moving away from is worshiping God as a power above and outside of ourselves, basically. Like science is more, it is a very limited, like we look at science from a very limited human perspective, but we also see God in things. And therefore, eventually we're going down this path where we will see God in ourselves. And that's the truth. Because God, it's like, people go to church or say like, praise God, we'll like give the credit to God. And that's okay. But the realization lies in like identifying your own self with that power. And instead of giving it away, you're claiming it. So, because there's something really beautiful about like surrendering the self and saying like, thank you, God, for whatever, like praying, that kind of stuff. But to realize that that's all within you is like what this chapter is talking about, and that that's the evolution that's happening. And that like, for those of us who have this gene key, if you identify at all with like the crystal or the rainbow children, like the indigo children, that whole idea, I personally resonate a lot with the idea of like the crystal children, which supposedly is like a generation of kids who were born in like the late 90s, which is, I was born in 97. And like, it's just like a phase of like the indigo children they've been around since like the 70s, and they've been breaking rules and following their own path. And that's what they came here to do, is to disrupt. And then the crystal children came here to basically like embody love. And to be a really beautiful, shining example of that. And like their lives are characterized by not being easy necessarily. They didn't come here to live easy lives, but they came here to like show love in all forms and all situations. And that's something I really identify with. And the way that he describes it, it makes it sound like it's like the crystal and the rainbow children who have this gene key, a lot of us. And so it's like part of this, like, Dolores Cannon and her 3 waves. And this is sort of an iteration of that. But it's like a gene key that's coming forth a lot more often these days, because this evolution is happening. And like people with this gene key help to progress that, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting, but it's like the process of identifying the power of God within yourself. So it's like, that's like what this whole entire book is about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact that you like that we talked about the gene keys last time and I sent you those chapters, which like just, nobody was on our last call, but
Yes,
basically out of the whole gene keys chart, you picked 4 at random, like not in order or anything, just the ones that kind of jumped out. And this was the second one. So then to have the urge to read that and then the book the next day.
Yeah. And the podcast when I listened to it. And like, those were the 2 factors that like, the podcast made me buy the book. And then I read the night before the book arrived, I read about this gene key. Like the timing is just perfect.
Yeah,
so whenever you want to question anything, remember that every little detail of everything is happening the way it's happening and when it's happening for a reason. Yeah. So it's hard to do that sometimes, but it does allow for so much freedom when you realize those details are outside of your hands and that you can just be focused on other things.
Yeah. Well, like the image, the visual of like praying, and I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying, like when you were talking about that, like, and you even looked up when you said what you said, because yes, like there is such an externalization of God and the higher power and all of that. But like really, when we pray, we're praying to our own higher selves to grant ourselves the change that we want. So like it's all between us and us and us. Like that's it's just a very I would imagine how you feel about that conclusion is a direct reflection of how much you're enjoying your life right now.
Yeah.
Like if you like your life, then it's like, oh great, like I'm doing this and it's going well and look at me go. And if you don't like your life, you're like, well shit, I created this.
Yeah.
You can take your theory and shove it like, nope, my landlord's a dude and he raised my rent and the government cut my blah blah blah. And like I mean there's all kinds of reasons why there's people taking away what's yours. And like scarcity is such an interesting teacher. Like when you think about anything that we can connect with in the physical is basically just a teacher. So guilt is a teacher, scarcity is a teacher, power is a teacher, all of these things, it's the earth school, we're just here to learn. And so yeah, like that one is like, what can you really learn from scarcity? And I think what you learn is like in a very Taurus kind of way, like what do you truly need to survive versus what is a nice to have luxury? And like get super clear on the difference between those two, because when you really boil it down, your survival needs are about this big. And most of us have a discretionary spending budget that's like this big.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if that's where you are, then there will never be enough money because the discretionary spending budget just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you just never have enough money. You could have $500,000 in the bank and be living $1 million lifestyle. And like, you're still poor at that point. Like it's all relative.
Exactly.
It's like, what do you really need? Scarcity breeds you to like the first few years of our business, the grocery store that we opened, the money was tight for like 3 years straight. It was like every single week, are you going to get to pay your bills or not? Like, are you going to have to find some cash from somewhere to pay the bills? And that obviously sucks. Like living week to week like that in scarcity mode sucks. But at the same time, like we optimize the business, we cut every inefficiency that there was. We got it down to its most basic, like needs to be here. These are our necessary expenses. This was all fluff. This was waste that didn't need to be wasted.
Right.
Like all of these different ways to find value in what you have and make it enough. That's a perspective thing. So like when you don't have enough money, you have to make it be enough, which means you're going to let go of this expense. You're going to let go of this. You're going to downsize your labor. You're going to not order as many groceries. You're going to make it be enough. And maybe those changes are exactly what you need to be living.
Exactly.
Maybe giving up those things are only standing in the way of like the path that you really wanted to live. So instead of like losing the things, you run out of money. So you can't have those things anymore. Like that's what's got to go. And maybe that's exactly what needs to go if that's the boat that you're sitting in.
Exactly. Yeah. You have to trust that like, because this whole, I mean, he's very clear about how busting loose from the money game doesn't mean like you just have unlimited dollars now forever, and your bank account's huge and you're so wealthy, and oh my God, wow, you won. It's like busting loose from the money game is not about winning the money game, for one, but it's mostly just about trust that you will have everything that you need, like in the moment that you need it. So yes, that's a really good point of like, if you are finding you don't have enough for like the things you're trying to do, really think about the things you're trying to do. And if that's aligned with your highest, that's what you're really trying to do, is align with your highest self,
right,
with your expanded self, and get on the same page about like, because I mean, yeah, like if you're going about your day, you wake up, you wait to see what gets popped into your hologram and you respond to it, like maybe you're spending way more than you need to be, and like you are trying to acquire or achieve things that aren't necessary for you. You know, there's no guarantee that like in this book, yeah, it's not like he's guaranteeing like, oh, well, you're going to be able to just go on all the trips, stay in all the nice places and do all the fancy things. And it's like, if that's genuinely like, if you wake up one day and you feel so inspired and motivated to go do that, then like, absolutely, that was meant for you to happen and the money will be there for you to do it. But if it's not, think about it. Like, how can I adjust the way I'm living? Maybe this is not in my highest alignment. You know, sometimes it's very easy, especially living in the material world, to think like there are these material things that I need to survive. But maybe you're being challenged to like really question that belief, you know? So just to trust in the highest good.
yeah, yeah. I feel like especially like these 6 to 8 years with Uranus in Taurus, like Uranus being the great liberator, the great awakener, like shaking us free of the ties that bind so that we can elevate and rise to like the full who we were born to be. And Taurus is like the earth realm, like literally shaking loose, like how we find security and stability in the world. Right. So this is like a whole prolonged experience of downsizing and simplifying and like redefining like what is enough. Because if you're saying I don't have enough, you have a like maybe more control than you're giving yourself credit. Well, a lot more control. We're saying like you create your whole life, but it's like enough is relative. So how much do you need? And is there wiggle room in that more than you're acknowledging? Because especially if you're renting, for example, there are cheaper apartments. Mm-hmm. Like if you're, you know, whatever the case is, like there are all kinds of substitutions that we can make. But like literally our ego is what gets in the way of that, where we look at other people our age who already own a home, or they're here and they have this and I don't have that. And like that comparison is what's even setting what do you need? And if you're trying to live up to like a keeping up with the Joneses kind of lifestyle, like most of the time you feel like, yeah, I don't have enough. Right. Because like everything that you get, it doesn't really get you anything like in that fulfillment factor. And then you just want more and more. And then you don't have enough money because you spent it all on stuff. Yep. And it's like, yeah, and that is relative and can happen at any amount of money. There are millionaires who feel like they don't have enough. And that's just eye-opening, or you would think it would be, you know, like obviously money's not what's filling that gap.
Exactly. It's like that quote that you showed me, this one, where it's like, you can never get enough of what you don't really need. Like, for real, you really can't. You know, like Jeff Bezos is probably so unsatisfied, and
he's freaking going to space, trying to find some satisfaction.
Yeah, like I don't know what your big goal in life is, or what like your big, I don't know, idea of extravagance would be. For me, it would be like traveling around the world, staying in like really nice hotels and doing all the nice fancy stuff, whatever. Like Jeff Bezos could do that, you know, easily. And I'm sure he does do stuff like that. But is he still unhappy? Like, I don't know him. I know that he had a rough divorce. I would imagine that he probably, like, there's still an itch left to be scratched, you know? Like, I would imagine that he senses that there's more to life, and he's probably not, just because he's the richest man in the world doesn't mean he's the happiest or most satisfied. Yeah. And I think that's kind of the point, is like the way that people used to live on Earth was like taking only what you need, only as much as you need and no more than that, because why would you need more when you have what you need? What's the point of having more? Like that comes from a scarcity mindset of needing to save up, needing to be prepared for if you lose it in the future. But that's not a moment to moment staying in the present way to live, because you're worried about the future. So like if you have enough right now, let it be enough.
Let it be enough.
Let it be enough. Yeah.
And that kind of goes back to what you said about like in phase 2, you don't even look at your bank account. You set everything on auto pay and you just know that there will always be money in there.
There will always be money. Yeah.
If it's about to run out, more will come in. Like you don't have to sit here and like figure it all out. Like last summer, the grocery training module project and like how that all unfolded was so satisfying in this whole realm of like, I got the idea for the training series before there was like a buyer. Like there was no buyer. There was just me wanting to make this because it sounded fun. And then like a week later, I get emailed an RFP, a request for proposal from like, they have a bunch of grant money and they're looking for people who want to make trainings. So I like copy, here's the course that I want to make, and they agree to pay me to make it. So like all of that unfolded after I had the idea of like, I want to make this because that sounds like fun. Yeah. I want to walk that path because that's what I would walk, whether I'm getting paid or not. And then here's the payment. And then that's like, 60% of the money that I need to make this year. And that's how it came to me was I want to make this training course because it sounds fun. Now, the physical unfolding of the training course, that's a whole other thing. And it has its moments where it's like, oh my God. But overall, it's like so, and that's a perfect example too, of like, no matter how good it gets, it's still possible for you to feel heavy inside the process just because it's physical. This is physical life. Like moments where it feels heavier than others. Like that's just bound to happen. But yeah. So I mean, like kind of the same thing as getting the question first because you're about to manifest the answer. It's like if I had gotten that RFP and not had the idea yet, by the time I got it, there was only like 4 days left until the deadline. And the people who sent it to me had it for like a month. And so they thought last minute to send it to me, but that was already a week after I had the idea. So I'd already done all the brainstorming and I had already like spent a week thinking about this and I would do it this way and I would have this and I would do these supporting documents and like putting it all together in my head so that when the RFP came, it was like, here's this. Like I didn't have to, in those 4 days, like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Like the opportunities, every single piece comes in the way that it's the easiest for it to. So like if the particular piece that you want isn't here yet, that's not the easiest way for it to go down.
Yep.
And so surrendering to our own highest self, that's the part where like, I was never cool with God because I'm like, nothing is going to control me, period. Like like that rules from 2000 years ago, I'm going to opt out of those.
Yeah, I'm good.
Not me.
Yeah.
My higher self, me being an extension of source energy itself, like my own higher self who scripted this whole experience for me is who's pulling the strings and guiding the intuition and giving me the moment by moment inspiration. Like you're not surrendering to anything outside of yourself. You're surrendering to your own highest intention. Mm-hmm. And like, oh my gosh. Yes. Like yes, please. Tell me what to do. Yeah. Tell me where to go.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all about trusting yourself and finding that within yourself, within your expanded self, because you are bigger than you can perceive.
That's such a second house thing. The self-trust,
so self-worth, security, like that being something that we find within ourselves in our pursuit often of finding security in the outside world. Like the only way to really truly achieve that is to find it within yourself. And that's the journey I really do feel I'm finding myself on, which that was why, like, it's not why, but I mean, like all of these things coming together and my discovering this book, and then now kind of like how I'm shifting my approach as I move forward, like felt like a really intentional step on that path. Like major.
Totally.
Definitely set some big things in motion. And then, I wake up this morning and there's like snow on the ground, and that's very odd for April. And I'm like, it's just, this is my world. This is my hologram. I like created this weird event of there being a snowy morning in April on April 11th to remind me that like new beginnings are afoot. Like they are here, you know, there are fresh starts happening. And like, this is my world. So why would there not be able to be snow on the morning of April 11th? This is my world. I create this. So there's no reason, there's no limitation. Like the only limitation is in my own mind. I created that. Pat on the back for me for being so convincing.
For being so convincing. Good job. Yeah.
Yeah, congratulate yourself, because like as much as this journey probably seems really, really difficult of being separated from our power, like we're doing this for a reason. We're doing it on purpose. And like, I think the example it gives, or not the example, but like what it said in the book was how like the creator power, so like source, God, just is constantly in a state of like absolute ecstatic bliss, joy, just creating, doing, being all the time. And it's really like, it's like magnificent, like magnanimous. It is like huge. And it's like, it's not even something we can put into words, but basically like what it was saying was having this human experience is the only way we can be in awe of that, is because we've separated ourselves enough that we can look at it. We're not a part of it, no. And that sounds a little sad, like, oh, I want to be a part of that massive joy. But we are a part of it, technically. But in this position we're in now, we're able to witness it and to be in absolute awe of it, and then to merge back with it. So it's pretty cool to like have that opportunity. If you think about it, like, oh, like the 3D is so bad. It's difficult, but like it's a really unique opportunity we have to witness our power as God. Yeah. It's just like, yeah, it's just a very different way to view things. But I think it's a perspective shift that a lot of us need in order to like really launch ourselves into that phase 2 that he calls it, of reclaiming the power. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love when you find like various spiritual teachers who are putting it like in their own language, their own context, their own examples. And then like really the frequency of all of it is like they're teaching the exact same thing. Like they've all reached this place of empowerment, more or less, and like being connected to their own divinity and finding that access point that's within ourselves. Like, yeah.
Exactly. Like they found that within themselves, and they created from pure joy from this place. They created something out of it. Like in a lot of cases, it's like a book, or it's, I don't know, like with Abraham Hicks, like there's a all these kinds of things with like law of attraction that she does and that they do. And there's so many ways to create from that place that then like spreads, you know, and then now it's been made possible that like I can create this book in my world, you know, to like help remind me of these truths. And then I can move forward from that place. And, you know, like once you've really changed yourself, everything else changes. It really does. And you can like spread the impact. And that is why, like, I feel like a lot of us are here right now is to do that. And it comes back to like Dolores Cannon's ideas and her 3 waves of volunteers and like the indigo crystal and the rainbow children, and how like we're all here to like help foster this process of change here in the Earth School / amusement park, because sometimes like the structure of the park itself needs to change and grow. Like it itself is its own, like Earth itself is God having a planetary experience, I guess we'll say, instead of a human experience. It's like God having a planetary experience. And so she goes through her own evolutions too. And a lot of us are like here to help foster that and help the Earth School / amusement park change with her, and change, you know, the way that people are playing the game here so that it can match up with that.
Oh no, I believe it. And I do believe though, like I said, that it's like transforming this frequency. Like that's your purpose. Like, and whatever frequency that is, you know, each of us are working at it a little differently, but like we all have something to transform, like evolve. We brought it this way and we're here to try to get it to be a different way. And it's all just for fun. Like it's all just for the joy of, like you said, like we take ourselves apart from God. We have this illusion of separateness, and we then spend our whole physical time like trying to get back to be with God. And Abraham talks about it like the vortex. So like the vortex is kind of where you merge yourself with the infinite, with source energy or whatever. Source energy, your highest self, is all in your vortex. So like you in human form raise your frequency to your vortex, and now you merge with your highest self and source energy. And she says, there was this guy, he, bless his heart, he was like, how do I get in the vortex and just never, never leave? How do I just get in there and stay in there and just be in there? And she's like, you wouldn't want that, because the best part of the vortex is when you go in. So if the best part is when you go in, then that means you want to get pooped out every once in a while and get back down to the contrast and like let it rile you up again so that you can raise your frequency again and pop back into the vortex. Because when you go in is as good as it will ever be. If you just stay and stay and stay and stay and stay, you get bored. That's why we come forward into physical energy. That's why non-physical doesn't just stay non-physical. It's bored. It knows its own divinity and its power. And you're like, yeah, so what? Like, I need to go and forget about all this so that I can be impressed by it once again.
Right.
So yeah.
Be in awe of it. Yeah. Be in awe of itself. The only way. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. It's like, I feel like that is really similar with like the movie analogy of, you know, you don't sit down and like all of a sudden everything's resolved and nothing actually happened. It's just everything is there now and it's done. Like there's no fun in that. There's no point in that. And we have to like, I know that although I do like from a very human perspective, like, yeah, it does feel really hard and difficult a lot of the time. That's why it helps to remind yourself, like, it's not real. It's not real. Yeah. Like sometimes if you need to just like remind yourself, say that to yourself, I've found that helpful. It's not real. It feels so real, but it's not.
Emotions feel real.
Emotions feel
They're,
so real.
I mean,
and we're partially here to experience it. You know, it's like, why do us humans have such a fascination with like true crime and things like that? It's like, you know, there is a curiosity there. There is like a reason why we'd want to experience negative things, seemingly negative things. Like this is all a part of our energy. And I don't know, like I know it doesn't seem pleasant, but it's not the point for everything to be pleasant, I guess.
Right. It's not at all. Like I mean, if you miss the contrast, then there's no reason to come here. It would be the same as non-physical.
The
like,
other end
the contrast is the whole point. Yeah. It'd be like buying a house and like never going in the basement.
Yeah.
Be like, no, I'm just not going to go down there. I'm not going to put anything down there. I'm not going to use that space. It's bad. Like, what a waste. Yeah. You know, like, I don't know. Yeah. You need that part. That part is the more that like we keep coming back over and over. And kind of like you said, like back to phase 1 lifetimes and phase 2 lifetimes. Like, I think you're exactly right that probably you live a few, at least, lifetimes that are purely phase 1, where like you're immersed in the physical and don't ever wake up. Yeah. And then probably several lifetimes where you do wake up at increasingly faster speeds. Like you come forward and you wake up when you retire. And then you realize like at age 65, like, holy shit, look, I lived on a hamster wheel for 65 years and now I'm here and like, I'm not fulfilled and I don't know, but at least now you're awake. At least you didn't die asleep. Like you woke up. And then you have kids born like, you know, now where they're freaking awake they're just little and they're awake the whole time. They don't ever dive into the programming that they're here with. And I'm like, that's probably like a phase 2 lifetime, you know, where you just come in and you're more awake. You're more immune to the programming and the conditioning of the physical.
Oh, yes. That is a phrase I've used, like, that has helped me understand my own early childhood is like an awake child. Is like, that is how I felt. But no one else understood. Nobody got it. I didn't have the words for it. Like I would close my eyes and see these visions of like, I specifically remember there was one where it felt like the earth was like zooming out, like infinitely zooming out and showing me that there is like infinitely more, like there is infinity outside of earth basically. And I tried to like put this into words one time to my mom and I'm like 5 years old. And I was like, you know, when you see the planet and then it's just, there's the black and then it's the other thing. It's like, you know, like there's no words, like there are no
and
words.
She's like, sure.
Right. She looked at me and she's like, what? You know, like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like you say to little kids sometimes, you're just like, yeah, sweetie, okay. And that was what I got all my life with these feelings I had. And so I had to just put it in a box and shove it down. But that curiosity, like that feeling has always been there. And that feeling of being like, just knowing that there's more. And I've always had this knowing that the way I like an understanding of the Matrix, basically, like the way people think of the Matrix being like society, I guess. Like there's Earth. You could live on Earth. You could live out in the middle of the woods and like money and society would be nothing to you because it's not real. It's a construct that everyone has agreed upon and that we're all interacting in it together. And I feel like I've always carried this understanding and I've never been able to like put words to it until I was older. And like, it's just a weird thing to like be such a small child and to have those thoughts and those feelings and those knowings. And then for everyone around you to basically say like, either I don't understand or no, you're wrong or you are on drugs, which is something that was starting to be said to me when I was pretty young. I was like, I don't think so.
I don't remember taking any drugs. No.
I'm 10. Like, I'm not on drugs. And
so as you were saying that of like, it was so weird to blah, blah, blah. I'm like, why do you think you wrote it that way?
See, there's the finding. That's a really good point. Like finding the purpose in it. And for me, I mean, like, I like what you said, like I knew, or I didn't know it at the time, but I planned to live a phase 2 life, like for the most part. And that's why at my age now, I'm finding myself in this threshold where like a lot of people don't until much later. And like, I don't think that I'm like in any sort of advanced position or anything. This is just how I planned it for this life, to like be able to do the work I came here to do. Was like, it was phase 2 work. And so I came in with an inherent understanding that presented itself to me from day one. Like it was always there. It got muddled. I basically believed in, like, I moved from that phase to fully believing in like my limitations. Like I remember watching the show, like That's So Raven, and like feeling like her. Like I was like, ooh, I think I'm like psychic like that. But then eventually I just grew out of like, this is childish, like that's like fantasy land, that's not real, like that, none of that's real, despite how real it felt. And so I definitely like I gave myself that early experience so that I could come back to it. Because I've always known it's been there and it's been my truth. But it needed to get buried through the teen years, through the early 20s, all of that, all of the conditioning, all of the limitations. I was laying out all of my eggs for my special Easter egg hunt for phase 2 of like the majority of my life now is reclaiming that power. And like, I really do believe like when we find ourselves in really extreme situations of discomfort, like if you are going through something really, really difficult, like I just think that you gave yourself that much more power to reclaim. Like you meant to become a very powerful being in this life. And so you offered a lot of power to be reclaimed. So like I know it seems really difficult and hard a lot of the time, going through really hard things that feel really uncomfortable, but there's like even more potential in that. Like it just feels like you were meant for something really big.
Yeah,
for sure.
And I mean, we do our best from where we are, and like zooming out, it's not all ever going to happen in this lifetime.
No,
like we're not supposed to get to like the end all be all, like, look, mom, fully healed. Like I don't think that even ever exists. It's like, you know, lesson after lesson after lesson after lesson, which for some people it's like, fuck that. I just want to be there already. Like, I don't want to keep going. Like, I just want to be done. And it's like, that's a level of exhaustion with the process where there's something off, because you should be enjoying it. You know, like it's fun. It's fun to transform energy and to feel better and better and better and better, and watch the universe like take your idea that, oh, that would be fun, and just deliver it to you. Or you say something like I told Dolly literally 2 days before I got $5,000 cash handed to me. I told Dolly, like, I have enough money I just wish I had a little bit more like cash for like spending money and stuff. And like even just a little bit, and I would feel like totally fine. Like other than that, I feel like I have enough money. And 2 days later, I go and it's like, oh, here's this. And I'm like, $5,000. Like,
That's amazing.
is that what you meant? Like, is that enough extra spending cash? You feel better now? Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
Oh
That's
my
insane.
gosh. Yeah. Because like the place that you're coming to that from is a place of like, well, I have enough and I'm good and I'm happy.
You technically.
Right. It's like a place of first and foremost appreciation. Like, I'm not going to come at this like everything's horrible and awful and I'm going to be broke tomorrow and I'm going to be homeless and, you know, like disaster type thinking.
Yeah.
Which is easy to do. And a lot of us find ourselves in those places. But even like, it doesn't have to be perfect. I feel like that's a really good example of how that mindset, even when it changes a little bit from like just a place of scarcity going to a place that's first and foremost gratitude and like in this moment I have enough.
Yeah.
It just
because it really does come back to defining like what do you absolutely need? Because when I think about how much money do I need, I think about my house, my car, and food. And like that's it. So the things that I spend my cash on are definitely discretionary. And like any or all of the things that I'm spending cash on could be cut out of my life if it truly needed to be. So I don't need these things, but it'd be really cool if I did have them. So like, you know, if I had just a little bit more cash, a little bit more spending money, that would be ideal. And then 2 days later, like here this is. So it's like getting really clear on like what is necessity and do you have enough for your survival needs? If yes, then you have nothing but gratitude to show for your entire life. Are there other things that, of course, it would be cool if you got to travel the world and stay in the hotels and like do all the things? Of course. Right. And it would be awesome if there was money for that. And there will be when you're meant to take that adventure. Exactly. But it's like, don't let I don't have everything that I'm ever going to need right now today hold you back from like how easy it is to manifest like, oh, you need a little extra, here's a little extra.
Right.
And like the best part of that story, the $5,000 is like, basically I got given the money, but my mom had it and I didn't know that this had all gone on. But so like, I didn't go get it until like a week after it was given to me so that 2 days before I went and got it, I could have this conversation where I'm like, I have enough. I wish I had this. And then it's like, here's this. So it's like, what is the funnest, easiest, best way for things to unfold? If they had just handed me $5,000 before I had that whole realization, if I have enough, but I would like this for this discretionary thing, like it would have just been like mind blowing, no doubt about it, but it definitely wouldn't have landed as profoundly as recognizing that I actually don't need it. But it would be nice to have, like, no doubt about it. And then there it is, like right there. But it was already mine. In that moment that I said it would be nice to have this extra cash, it was already mine. It wasn't in my physical possession. It was in her possession. But like, so it just, the whole thing of unfolding, it's like the divine timing. It will come about in the moment that it's meant to, with the best possible impact that it can have. It's not just about giving you $5,000. It's about recognizing that you have enough,
right?
And that this money isn't necessary. It's extra.
It is.
And like, it's not even real. Cause like, unless you need it, it's not real. It's just paper.
Yeah.
And then when you need it, it converts into something that's actually valuable.
Right.
So like extra money is a very fascinating concept. And I feel like that's when you get into a job where you make a big bunch of money and you have all this extra, that this concept of like, what even is money? Like to just sit there and pile up numbers on a screen like that.
You have all these numbers, you know, in your bank account and whatever, and they're big numbers. But what do you really have? Like that's a number on a screen.
Yeah.
You know, like that could be gone tomorrow.
Right.
And
that's something that Blue says in the second money episode where she's telling about a dream she had, how they had done a course and she got like paid or whatever. And it was the best course payday she'd ever gotten. And she had a dream shortly after where basically she was feeling like proud that she had this money, that she, was making it or whatever. And then she like went to the dentist and ran out on the dentist and didn't pay her dental bills. And the dental bills were $500,000. And she was panicked in the dream, now looking at her bank account, like, oh my gosh, like I don't have $500,000. And she woke up understanding like this money that you think looks like a lot can be nothing in just like the blink of an eye. Like it can just be nothing. Like I have a person in my life who was on her way to meet her boss for lunch during the workday, and it was a little bit icy out, and she doesn't remember the accident, doesn't really know what happened, but basically she woke up in the hospital several days later having like all these injuries, about $500,000 worth of medical bills, and she's now got that in her life. Like that's her reality, is that she owes like hundreds of thousands of dollars, has no credit because of that. Like it's like paralyzing her in her life, but like this is the world that she is moving through, like it's crazy the things that we can manifest for ourselves that really teach us about money and how like it's so transitory. There's no such thing as enough of like, what you really don't need, you'll never have enough, or whatever the quote is.
Right.
Yeah.
No such thing as enough. And like old Bob says in the book, he says there is no winning the money game. Like you're saying, like Blue has made all this money that like feels really good, like wow, all this creation I put out in the world was received well, and I received this appreciation for it. And then there's the dream where all of a sudden she needs the amount of money she needs is so much greater than this amount that once seemed so large. And it's like it just shows you that, I mean, yeah, like he does. And you've used this example, like he uses the example in the book, is like, who's to say that someone who makes $50,000 a year isn't like, there's no reason that they are any less successful than someone who makes $500,000 a year,
right.
Like it's a different number and one of the numbers is bigger, but that doesn't mean that either of those people are any more or less successful than the other, or that they're doing any better at the money game. Because it is funny too. I mean, he opens the book by basically explaining some basic rules of baseball and of golf and football. I think like there's 3 games where like he kind of explains the gist of the rules and how they're extremely arbitrary. Like they don't apply to anything else except that game, like use the L-shaped metal rod to get the tiny hole in the little cup in the grass. Like that doesn't apply anywhere else. It's made up. But like when we follow those rules and we play the game of golf or whatever, like you hit the little ball into the cup and you did good, like good job, you win, whatever.
Yeah.
There are no rules like that for the money game. Like there's a ton of rules that don't really add up, and there's no winning. There are no winners. It's like, it's a different kind of game that we're set up to fail at, like because there isn't winning. And we're made to think that the limitations we experience with money are representative of who we are. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not true. A lot of people do identify with the amount of money they have. And that's tough. It's hard not to do that. But he's like really trying to remind you that that's not reality. That's not what's real.
Which that's just waking up out of the matrix, like a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more to what truly matters, what's like really important to you. And that is so perfect for like all this energy that we have in the sky right now with like Taurus, Aries, Pisces, like asserting ourselves and what's important to us personally and surrendering to the bigger picture of like the overall life isn't real concept of like, I feel like all this Pisces energy is definitely helping us to wrap our minds around. Like there's so much more going on here than just our tiny little human drama of like what we think our life is. Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it can be really relieving to like take a breath and like just put all that shit down for a second, because none of it's real anyway.
Exactly. None of it's real. And if you get overwhelmed by the like the uncertainty of it, the big hugeness of it, like remember that there's nothing more big or huge than you because you are God. Like everything is happening under your umbrella of being God. So whenever you feel like out of control or anything like that, like that's the unique position we're in right now. And it's actually like such an honor to be able to even feel that way. If you really think about it, I think that's like, yeah, the main perspective shift is when we learn to just surrender to the big nebulousness of, so Pisces. And I have a lot of Pisces energy. So this is like kind of my natural state. I have a harder time grasping like structure. And I'm very much more used to just sort of letting things flow and like letting things be big and ungraspable. But like with this Taurus energy of all these themes with the money and the inner security, and it's like, just let it be. Like, yes, it's all big and huge and Pisces and nebulous and all that, but like, let it be simple as well. That's like with Taurus. And I can link to the blog article about it too. Just like, divinely simple inspiration. Like, let it be simple. Because yes, it is big and huge, but that's because you're God and it's a pretty big deal. You're a pretty big deal. You are. Yeah. And so
and just resting in that, in the present moment. Because again, I feel like a lot of what we decide we need are things that we're trying to populate into our future. Like, I need stability because I want to have kids someday. So I need to like XYZ because I'm trying to get ready for this future that I am going to have. And it's like, none of that is doing what we're talking about. Like,
it's not.
What do you need right now? Like right this minute, like to survive and be okay in the world right this minute. Like planning your future. That's not for your lower self to do. Your higher self already did it, right? Yeah. The future is already worked out. So all we can ever do as our conscious self is like rest in this moment, knowing that we're 100% taken care of, no matter what's going on the surface, if we allow it to be that way. And that's why inner peace, I think, can be a little tough to grasp, or Taurus energy, that simplicity in general, because there's really nothing to grasp. It just is what we are. Exactly. So like when you stop trying, when you stop reaching, like when you just rest and open, like well-being is what you are. Like Abraham says, your cork floats naturally until like you hold it under the water and like get all on top of it with what about this and what about this, Bill, and what about that, and like now your cork's underwater. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
So you just let it
go. Oh, totally. Yeah. Exactly. Like that's well-being is the natural state.
Yes.
And part of us humans and how we're able to convince ourselves so successfully of this illusion is because our mental energy is so powerful. And that's the energy that's like this block between you and your truth, your highest truth, your highest expanded self. Wow. What was this? Yesterday, 2 days ago? I was in a coffee shop and I went in the bathroom, and you never know where you'll find inspiration, right? And there was this poem written on the wall, and it's very short, but I kind of want to read it because it brought together for me, it was like all of the astrological energies right now with the Taurus energy going on and the Libra energy, and very much of like letting go and finding inner peace, I guess, like the themes of surrender and letting that lead you to your own inner state of well-being. But there was this poem written on the wall, so I'm going to read it. But it says, it's by Mary Oliver. It's called Wild Geese. But it says, you do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. So I thought that was really potent or poignant, I guess, for this time, especially this line of like, you only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. That feels so Taurus.
Yes.
So Taurus.
And like how just Venus in general, like follow the cuteness. The things that you love are guiding you. Like they are taking you where you need to go to pay attention to what you need to pay attention to. Like that's part of the script. It's like luring us into the right place at the right time. Like,
it is. Yeah. Exactly. And it's like, just even that first line of like, you do not have to be good. And it's like, you don't have to. Okay, I'm sorry. There's one more that I put in that I cut out of a magazine that I put into my closet because I keep this like vision board in my closet where it's just a piece of like scrapbooking paper. And then if I see something that I feel inspired by, I will like tape it onto there. And it's somewhere that I go every day. And inside my closet, I open the door and I look inside my closet. And so I see it every day. And it's a good place to have like an inspiration board, I guess. It's where I collect inspiration. But I cut this out of a magazine. And this is by Julia Cameron, who's the author of The Artist's Way. And that's a book that's been on my list for like a super long time. And I will one day read it. But she says, a poem again. She says, "Come to me. There is no darkness in which I cannot see you. Come to me. My green heart holds your ancestors. They are waiting to hear your dreams. Speak to them. They know your name. Do not imagine you are alone. Do not imagine they have left you. They are listening, waiting for your voice. Come home. All of us are waiting. Every bird remembers you. The lion in his pride still knows your name. The gazelle, the snake, the silver heron, lifting at the shore, all these and more, your family. Come back to me. You do not need to grind your bones to dust, rusting your heart. You are known to us. Only come home." So I cut that out and put that in my closet, and I read that like every day, pretty much.
Yeah.
But it's again this, like Mary Oliver in this first poem says, you do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. Yeah. All is well. Everything's okay. And you're not doing anything wrong. Nothing is wrong. It's a really good, like a strong reminder. And then Julia Cameron says, you do not need to grind your bones to dust, rusting your heart. It's like we put a lot of the things we experience, we put ourselves through because we think that there's something that's wrong and that we need to be doing more. We need to be doing something different. And it's like, we never need to do anything more than just be and let that lead the way.